I asked for more of your philosophical hot takes and will again be ranking their spiciness. And yes, minty is still very much the opposite of spicy. And if you don't like it, get to like it. The most valuable form of human life is a full-grown adult, 18 to 35. And so in war, child soldiers should fight for them instead of the adults fighting for the children. Creating more children is easy, but creating a fully developed and free functioning human takes time and money. Say what you will about this, ladies and gentlemen, this is an Indian spicy take. Of course, it relies on a rather cold and calculating, functional idea of what makes something valuable, but in a way, it makes some kind of sense. Who's worth more, a newborn child, which you could just make another one tomorrow, or a fully grown adult who not only has their own life, their own history, memories, people that care about them, but also, as the commenter points out, is probably also more functionally useful to the society that they live in. So why is it then that our moral intuitions are reversed? Why would we rather save the child than the adult? Putting aside the fact that child soldiers probably aren't quite as effective as adult soldiers, I think this also demonstrates that morality is simply not about this kind of functional value. And it may be there's no good way to justify why we should save a child over an adult other than that, well, they're more innocent and that just feels wronger. But if that's the case, then perhaps this is just a good demonstration of ethical emotivism, the idea that moral claims are just reducible to emotional expression. We strongly intuitively feel that the strong should protect the weak, that children shouldn't fight in wars, that adults have a duty to protect those younger than them. Can this be justified on a transactional, mathematical morality that underpins the claim that this commenter is making? No. But maybe that just shows that this isn't what ethics is all about. I believe physically and scientifically that we revolve around the sun, but in a metaphysical sense, the universe revolves around the Earth, because the Earth is the only place that has life, and therefore everyone who observes the universe. Functionally speaking, we are the center. They've labeled this philosophical heliocentrism. I think they meant to say philosophical geocentrism, and this, once again, ladies and gentlemen, is an Indian spicy take. That's right, geocentrism is back. There's no universal frame of reference in the universe. If you're on some planet and a spaceship is moving away from you, that planet is moving away from the spaceship just as the spaceship is moving away from the planet. The only thing which determines which one's still and which one's moving is where you place the observer. And yeah, okay, the orbital patterns make it seem as though the Earth is revolving around the sun and the sun is moving around in our Milky Way galaxy, but that's only from a particular frame of reference. If your frame of reference is the Earth, then everything else in the universe is revolving around it. It's just doing so in a pretty weird pattern. I am absolutely in love with this idea, and especially given that frames of reference require an observer and Earth is the only place with any observers on it. Yeah, except for those on the ISS, but that's basically on the Earth anyway. Why does it not make perfect sense to say that, yeah, in a metaphysical, observational sense, the Earth is the center of the universe? Geocentrism is so back. We can never be ourselves. We're simply a product of everyone around us. I think I'm going to have to give this mild. It's an interesting thing to think about, but it's hardly original. It's impossible to even learn how to speak and use language, let alone creating worldviews and cultures without the input of other people. But it's not just the people around you today that shape who you are, it's also those who came before you, your ancestors. And have you ever wondered about where it is that you come from? Well, in this video, I partnered with MyHeritage to show you exactly how you can find that information out. It'll give you an ethnicity estimate, a breakdown of your origins across 42 supported ethnicities and 2,114 geographic regions. It will also find DNA matches for you, so you can discover new relatives you didn't know you had. I'd never done this before, so I didn't really know what to expect, but MyHeritage made it pretty easy for me. They sent me a small box with everything I needed, including instructions. I just had to take the swab, rub it on my cheek for 2 minutes, put it into a tube, put it into an envelope, all provided by MyHeritage, and drop it off at the post office. And I'm told that my results have come through, and I waited to make this video until they did, so that I can open them right now for the first time. Okay, so I'm 51% English and 49% Irish. For a long time, I've been telling people that I'm half Irish, but now I have the DNA proof, and look out for the St. Patrick's Day special of Within Reason. This is cool. It even shows me where in Ireland my Irish side is from. And by the way, MyHeritage has committed in its privacy policy to never sell or license genetic data. Okay, so I don't have the most exotic DNA, but there's also a tab for DNA matches. So it's found what it thinks of first or second cousins of my parents, or second or third cousins of me. This is pretty cool, especially given that with their their permission and with mine, I can get in contact with these people. 9,844 DNA matches for me. And MyHeritage is having a promotion right now, so click the link in the description or scan this QR code to check it out. And if you use the coupon code AlexOC at checkout, you'll also get free shipping. With that said, let's move on. On AI art/imagery, the thing that happens when a human takes inspiration from artwork is not meaningfully different from what happens when AI looks at art, steals its data, swaps it around, and makes something new out of it. If one is made illegal, so too should the other. Given what a hot topic this is at the moment, I think this is a spicy take. A lot of people have an ethical qualm with AI art because, of course, AI is trained on a large data set, and a lot of the artists whose work is in that data set did not give their consent to the AI being trained on it. It's seen as a kind of plagiarism. When somebody presents this argument in precisely this way, I tend to agree with the commenter. There isn't much of a meaningful difference here to me between AI doing that and a human being growing up listening to a bunch of other people's work and eventually producing something of their own. You can't just live your life in complete isolation, learn how a musical scale works, and then create a pop song out of nothing. And especially in music, this leads to scandals of plagiarism. Did Ed Sheeran rip off Marvin Gaye? Did Coldplay rip off Joe Satriani? Who knows? What it does show is that art is never produced in a vacuum, and the people who made the music that was the inspiration for your favorite song were not credited in that song's production. And if human beings can get away with that, why not AI too? I think in time this debate will become popular enough that this view will be seen as relatively standard, but for now, I'm going to call it spicy. If you're a Christian who believes in A, hell, and B, the age of salvation, there is no morally or biblically consistent way to justify not killing as many children as you can while you're alive. I think by the age of salvation here is meant something like the age of accountability, so an age after which you can be judged and sent to heaven or hell. So if you believe that there's a hell and children of sufficient youth are guaranteed to avoid it, why wouldn't you do them all a favor and kill them? This sounds like a fairly spicy take, but in debates around religion, this idea does come up a lot as an objection. Well, why don't you just kill people if they all get to go to heaven anyway? So I think I'm forced to give it mild. It sounds spicy because it sounds like you're saying you should kill loads of children, but you're not doing that. You're actually just making an objection to Christianity. They say there's no morally or biblically consistent way to not justify killing children, but I think the Bible's quite clear that murder is wrong. Now, that's complicated, of course, by the fact that God condones and instructs the killing of children at numerous points throughout the Old Testament. But I think it's fair to say on a Christian worldview that without explicit divine command, such as in those interesting Old Testament stories, it's wrong to kill innocent children. Having said that, doesn't it make it all the more sacrificial? If you killed a bunch of children and got rewarded because you sent a bunch of kids to heaven, then fine. But if you're forced to go to hell yourself as a result of liberating these children from hell, isn't that just so much more of a virtuous sacrifice? In fact, taking that into consideration, I think I am going to bump this up to spicy. My moral hot take is that incest is not morally wrong if both of the parties consent and don't produce a baby. Or maybe same-sex incest because the heterosexual kind still has the possibility to produce a baby. Whenever I ask for philosophical hot takes, incest comes up a lot. And I think it's got something to do with the fact that it's well known that it's surprisingly difficult to condemn incest on a variety of moral worldviews. If you're some kind of utilitarian that just cares about suffering and pleasure and nothing else, and there's two consenting parties that aren't going to produce any kind of effect on the world around them, then why on earth shouldn't they be able to do it? For some people, this kind of realization tells them, okay, incest is fine then. And for other people, it tells you that, well, because incest is wrong, the philosophy that led us there must be wrong. So you can take your pick. One man's modus ponens is another man's modus tollens, as they say. I myself am an ethical emotivist, so I think that moral statements are expressions of emotion. That means that if I can't think of a reason why we condemn incest except for finding it kind of icky and disgusting, well, ethical emotivism is one of the few secular ethical theories that can therefore say that incest is, well, wrong. But I'm going to give this mild. Of course, if you said it in a bar or something, you'd get some funny looks. But in the context of discussing ethics and philosophy, it kind of just comes up all the time. And I just find it difficult to give such a common ethical topic the rank of spicy. Having said that, looking at this again, incest is not morally wrong if both of the parties consent and don't produce a baby. Why? Why does having a baby make a difference? Well, because babies of incest are often born disabled. Okay, what's wrong with having disabled children? Sure, you're giving a child a less good life than another child, but if that's the only way that that particular child could exist, then as long as their life is worth living on the whole overall, Have you wronged them? This specific discussion of the ethics around bringing someone into existence with a deficiency, but such that that specific person couldn't begin to exist without the deficiency, is known as the non-identity problem and is discussed by Derek Parfit in Reasons and Persons. I plan to do an entire video on this at some point in the future, so watch this space. So someone else here has said that incest should not be viewed as a moral issue, but a public health issue. Now this might make some sense to you, but if we start thinking about why morality evolved, especially if we're not moral realists, we might decide that, well, the reason morality evolves in the first place is because societies which develop these kinds of moral considerations for each other are more likely to survive. If that is an account of how morality got going in the human species, then essentially every moral issue ever really started out as a public health issue, we just didn't realize it. Anyway, yeah, whenever I do these videos, incest comes up a lot. I think we've already covered it, but given how much it comes up and is discussed, and given how much sort of shock value it has, I just don't think it's actually that spicy of a philosophical take. That's why I'm going to give it mild. Ethical emotivism is closer to I will put my laws on their hearts and write them on their minds than it is to any competing secular view on morality. This is great. So that's a quote from the Epistle to the Hebrews in the New Testament. That's quite emotive language. I mean, when you think with your heart instead of your head, it feels like you're doing something more emotive than rational. And so if ethical emotivism is true, that ethics is something like an expression of emotion, then maybe that's because it's the case that God just put the moral law into our hearts, which is just a poetic way of saying into our emotions. I think that's a really cool idea. It's not something I've heard discussed a ton and is something I would like to explore further. So I'm going to give it spicy. Ayn Rand is the most underrated philosopher, not because she's great, but because she's rated so unbelievably comically poorly despite having some good ideas. Okay, yeah, I like this. It's a bit like how I say that the Beatles are underrated, even though they're the most highly rated band of all time. I mean, I don't really have any time for Ayn Rand's objectivism. If you're interested, by the way, I had a debate with a man called Craig Biddle about Ayn Rand's objectivism. I'll link that down below. But people really do dislike Ayn Rand, like a lot. And yeah, I'm not a fan of the philosophy, but is she as bad as people often claim? Maybe not. It's hard to say, but I love this way of framing the concept of overrated and underrated. So, well, we'll give it spicy. Spongebob Squarepants is an elaborate critique of materialism. I've heard a lot of fan theories about SpongeBob, such as that the main characters all represent the 7 deadly sins, so Patrick is sloth and Mr. Krabs is greed and so on, or that the characters all represent different mental disorders, or that they're a result of nuclear contamination. So this really belongs in that category. I don't know if you mean materialism as in the philosophical view that there is only matter in the universe, or if you mean in the political sense of materialism, or in the colloquial sense of caring too much about material things. But SpongeBob SquarePants fan theories are kind of a dime a dozen, and so especially without any further elaboration on this, I'm going to give it mild. Well, I think I might have been a bit generous in the ratings in this video. There's been a lot of spicy, but then maybe your philosophical hot takes really are just that hot. Whatever the case, I will be asking for more of them in the future, so make sure that you're following me on Instagram and Twitter and subscribe here on YouTube so that you can submit your takes for a future episode. And also remember that if you want to easily test your DNA and find out about your geographic and ethnic history, then you can do so with MyHeritage by going to the link in the description or scanning the QR code that's on your screen right now. And if you use the coupon code ALEXOC at checkout, you'll also get free shipping. Thank you for watching, thank you for the hot takes, and I'll see you in the next one.